The Morning Majority on 630.
It's 7:07 on WMAL, and we have Joe DiGenova, legal expert, on the phone. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning.
How you doing? Did you hear about this? I want to ask you about this David Wu case. He, of course, dressed up like a tiger at one point and sent a picture of him.
Wu.
Yes, Tiger Wu. And no specific charges for that incident,
No.
but now we've got these revelations of perhaps unwanted sexual contact with a
He got
young
a
woman.
walking ticket for dressing weird.
Yeah, exactly. But it sounds like the woman at the time did not go to the police, and that this came out of a message leaked by staff or maybe sources on the Hill. So what's the legal future of this?
Well, Representative Wu, a Democrat, we have to underscore that because it's hard for it to show up in the printed
Yeah, you never
media.
see
It sort
that.
of comes at the end of the story like that he's a Democrat. Actually, it's in the Ethics Committee. I think it's only a matter of time between before the Democratic caucus asks him to resign immediately. Now, they can't make him resign. They can expel him, but my guess is, given what the House is dealing with right now, this is something that's going to be on the back burner. But my guess is also a recall is probably imminent in his jurisdiction. This guy, and we mean no disrespect about this, apparently has some very serious mental problems which have been lingering around for several years. And so this latest accusation, apparently, which has some substance to it because it's obviously under investigation by the police out in his state,
Right.
Is going to lead to either a resignation or an expulsion. I think this is going to be a short-lived story. The Democrats cannot have him hanging around.
Well, if this is one of those things where she's a donor's daughter, if it turns out she wasn't underage and for for politically motivated reasons, she doesn't bring charges, is that something that the police still can do something with?
Yes, they can, and prosecutors can. They have the power to force testimony. They usually try not to do that where a victim does not want to go forward. But if it is a public official and it does involve the abuse of power, they may very well decide that, notwithstanding her wishes, they will proceed with the case anyway. Plus, the other staff members in his office are not going to let this go away.
Right.
It's quite obvious that people in his office think he needs help, and they're doing everything they can to precipitate that by leaking information about him. So he can't survive because his own people think he's not worthy of office.
I don't know how well you know Norwegian law, but I'm fascinated by the story.
Well, let me tell you about it.
This horrible story, this guy, Anders Breivik, who's a crazy man in all accounts, and with his manifesto, and blew up essentially a bomb in Oslo, and then at the same time was traveling to this island where teenagers and young people were saying, and then just shot them and had these bullets that were meant to kill, and wound up killing almost 100 people.
Yes.
But there's a law in the books in Norway that says you can only go to jail for 21 years and there's no death penalty.
That's correct.
So
this is a product of post-World War II. Remember, the Scandinavian countries have historically been extremely liberal, both with regard to drugs, prostitution, immigration, multiculturalism. Post-World War II, they became even more so in their reaction to the exploits of Nazi Germany. And part of that was laws prohibiting the death penalty. They have no death penalty in Norway, and there's no death penalty in all of Europe. And so these countries recently, there's been a tremendous discussion of immigration policies in Norway and Denmark and Sweden and elsewhere. The problem that the Norwegians have is they do not believe in incarceration. Historically, they have not believed in incarceration. They do not believe in lengthy prison terms. They're going to have to confront that now because I believe the maximum he can get, even if they pile on every conceivable, is 30 years. That's a long prison sentence, but it's by no means life without parole, which does not exist in Scandinavia.
Well, he's only 32, but you couldn't get like a separate murder count for every person he killed?
Apparently, under Norwegian law, you cannot. Now, I'm going to spend some time today looking into this a little more deeply, and perhaps we'll have a full report next Monday. But the bottom line is, it looks like they're stuck with themselves. I mean, this is their philosophy, and so if that's your philosophy, you live and die with it.
Well, let me ask you this, because not only you're a legal expert, but you've got a great political mind as well, and you understand these things and have opinions on it. Because this guy was anti-Muslim or was against, the migration of Muslims into his country, do you think what kind of effect will this have on future policy when it comes to immigration or just the general, attitudes towards
as you know, this all started, the concern about so-called multiculturalism and its alleged failure, and I believe it is a failure in Europe, started with Angela Merkel, who gave a huge speech several months ago where she said the multiculturalism had ended. She then was followed quickly by a similar speech by Sarkozy, the president of France, and David Cameron, the Prime Minister of England, all three in succession saying that each of these multiculturalism policies had led to highly segregated Islamic communities where there was no assimilation into the culture of the country. Now, this guy obviously took it to the extreme. My guess is that this will have no effect whatsoever on those debates, and the reason is that in each of those countries there is a growing right-wing movement which is based on anti-immigration and anti-multiculturalism and demands for assimilation. Remember the debate in France about the burqa and the niqab, which is the full face cover. That is going on all over Europe. You may have recalled, we had a conversation about this over a year ago, where I told you that as a result of our travels in Europe, this started several years ago, we had sensed a growing opposition, not only to Islam, but to multiculturalism, to the Roma and all of that. It has gotten bigger and bigger. And when that happens and the political system does not accommodate it by figuring out ways to deal with problems that people perceive, you get people like this nut job who feel they have no other course. Now, obviously, this guy needs to be locked up forever, and it's really too bad he wasn't shot and killed in the incident so he could be forgotten about. But now, they're going to have to deal with this guy. But this issue is not going to go away, and this is not going to stop it. In fact, it's probably going to intensify the need for political leaders to deal with the problem of no assimilation in Europe.
Joe, new topic. The Justice Department preparing to formally subpoena Rupert Murdoch's News Corp for information tied to allegations that reporters attempted to hack the phones of families of September 11th victims.
This is fascinating. The origin of this story is that it was from an unnamed source in a London tabloid, which is an opponent of the Murdoch organization, with no sourcing whatsoever, saying that the source speculated that there might have been tapping of the voicemails of 9/11 victims. There is absolutely no evidence that that occurred, and if the Justice Department is going, they didn't say they'd issued them, they said they were preparing them. But because the News Corp is in fact a news organization, the Justice Department has to go through a series of internal steps where they use every other possible means to get the information before they issue a subpoena. That generally means they have to talk to the organization. They have to ask them if they've done an internal investigation. They can't just issue the subpoena according to their own internal regulations. But it appears that they're preparing to do so and want to be ready. We shall see. I think that the Justice Department has to be very careful here, because they may end up overreaching in a situation when you're dealing with the media. It's been a long time since the New York Times leaked all that information about the telephone intercepts.
Right.
I think that's going on 7 or 8 years, and the only subpoena we know about in that case was to Jim Risen of the New York Times, and nothing thus far has happened after about 7 or 8 years. So they're pretty fast to act when it involves Fox and News Corp. I think they have to be very careful, or they're going to find themselves on a very slippery slope. And when I say they, I mean the Department of Justice.
And in fact, very quickly, those special procedures would be in place because it's a news organization. Basically, this would have to be signed off at the highest levels. We're talking about the Attorney General.
By the Attorney General himself, personally.
All right,
Joe. Great to talk to you as always. Appreciate your time.
Okay, guys. Take care.
Joe DiGenova, our legal expert and former U.S. Attorney for the District of